Despite the fact that it is way past the middle of the year, today I want to do the mid-year freakout tag, only this is a movie spin on the normal book tag. Partly because I just like talking about films, but also partly because I just haven't read enough books for that tag to be interesting. So I thought it would be fun to do a movie version instead. Although this is August, so it's not an accurate reflection of my mid-year film statistics, I have watched 154 films this year so far, and it's definitely been a good film year so far. I think I've already seen quite a few films that I know are going to end up on my top 10 list at the end of the year, including the answer to this first question, which is the best movie you've watched so far in 2022. My favorite film that I've watched so far, and probably will end up being my favorite film of the year, is Come On, Come On, directed by Mike Mills. This is a film starring Joaquin Phoenix as this guy who works for a radio station and is doing a project where he's interviewing kids. So we see scenes of him doing that interspersed with him going to stay with his nephew while his sister goes and helps out her ex-husband who is dealing with some mental health problems. And so the film is about Joaquin Phoenix's character learning how to be perhaps a more responsible adult than he's ever been required to be before, and learning about what it's like to take care of a kid for the first time, and discovering it's really not as simple or as easy as he ever thought it was going to be, but also was unaware of how much it would affect him emotionally and just cause him to have so much personal growth throughout the film as well. Mike Mills is just one of my favorite directors. He creates these films that are so beautiful and complete little vignettes of human life. He so clearly is writing from his own personal experience and what he has observed throughout his own life, and so everything just feels so real to life and so accurate to how real people behave. And this film is no exception. It's often quite rare for me to want to watch films again, but this one I cannot wait to watch it again. Second question is best sequel you've watched so far in 2022. This one has to be Scream, the new installment of Scream, which is technically Scream 5, but is called Scream. I've never been much of a horror film person, but the Scream franchise I really got into watching all of the films before seeing this film. I think because they have this kind of murder mystery structure in that you obviously are trying to guess who the person behind the mask is, and also they're just so fun and silly and meta and self-aware, and I really enjoy that kind of meta humor. And I love that the original characters and actors have a storyline throughout the whole series. It just makes it so much more engaging, and you actually care about what's happening to these characters as well. So yeah, I thought they did a really good job in, you know, a cinema landscape that is full of reboots and full of sequels and prequels. Perhaps because Scream had already kind of done that before with Scream 4, which is a film making fun of reboots. And perhaps it's just because it is easier to continue a horror film story, because with this kind of horror film, you're expecting it to be mostly the same, with just maybe some new characters and some updated jokes, and that's kind of what we got. And they did a really good job of keeping the old characters in the story while introducing a whole series of new characters that we can follow along with the inevitable sequels that will come. And despite the fact that it's written and directed by different people from the original films, because Wes Craven died a few years ago, but they did a very good job of keeping the same tone and humor, and it really felt like a continuation of the original films. Question number 3, new release you haven't watched yet but want to. The only new release that's come out like in America that hasn't come to Australia yet that I haven't seen that I want to is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. This looks like such an adorable little film about a stop motion shell called Marcel who wears shoes, and I think the basic plot line is that he wants to find his family. This is an A24 film and it's their first family friendly film, and I love stop motion, I love kids films, I also love the artistry that you usually get with films distributed by A24, and annoyingly there's literally no sign anywhere of an Australian release date, so very much hoping that actually eventuates and I don't have to like find it somewhere on the internet, because I'd much rather go to the cinema to see it. Question number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. There's a few films coming out that I'm quite excited to see. The first one is See How They Run, which is a film jumping on the bandwagon of the new excitement about murder mystery films that Knives Out kind of sparked. This one has Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan playing a detective duo, and looks like Saoirse Ronan is being the comedic sidekick, which is going to be so good. I think she is really funny, and she doesn't get the opportunity to do a lot of comedic roles. And I always love Sam Rockwell. He is always hilarious. I think he's doing a British accent in this film though, so that will be interesting to watch. And then the rest of the cast is also packed, as you usually get with murder mystery. That is like a classic trope of old Agatha Christie films, is that they would always fill the cast with these big stars, and half the fun of it is watching the murder mystery, but the other half is also seeing these big stars all interact in a fun, very melodramatic way. It's also set in the 30s, I think it is. I might be wrong, around that era in London, and that's also going to be very aesthetic and very fun to watch. Another film is Don't Worry Darling, with Florence Pugh and Harry Styles. It's actually quite funny. There's been this weird controversy kind of on TikTok, I think, about the fact that Florence Pugh hasn't really been advertising the fact that she's in this film, when she apparently on Instagram is always sharing stuff about the films that she's in. So there's a lot of theories about the fact that she wasn't very happy with the way that Olivia Cooke and Harry Styles got together on the film, and perhaps weren't focusing as much on creating the film as they should have been. Anyway, I'm still curious to see the film. It looks visually impressive. Having watched the full trailer, the storyline looks like it might be a bit basic, but either way, it should be good because Florence Pugh is an amazing actor, so it's always worth watching something she's in. And the last one I'm looking forward to is Bros, which is sort of touted as like the first big studio comedy starring and written by and directed by gay people. Comedies are obviously very hit and miss because people's humor is very subjective, and I often find my humor doesn't really align with the humor in these big American comedies. But the trailer is very funny, and as long as they haven't put all the best jokes in the trailer, which often happens with comedies, then it should be a really fun film to watch. I'm very excited to see that one at the screening with a big audience, because that is just the best way to see that kind of film as well. Question number 5 is biggest disappointment. My biggest disappointment in film was The Electrical Life of Louis Wayne. I was really looking forward to this film. I remember when the first still came out of Benedict Cumberbatch and Claire Foy in late Victorian costume. It's about this real artist from the time who became famous for drawing these cats with big eyes, dressed in human clothing, doing human activities. He is pretty much responsible for cats becoming household pets and being beloved, because before they were considered nuisances apparently, and not really kept as pets in the UK at least. It just sounded so fun, so interesting. The real life story of the guy is both very sad but also so unusual, but I felt like it just fell victim to the classic biopic tropes where it tried to cram basically his entire life into a film. And it just didn't work because we were flashing past so many of his life events. And Benedict Cumberbatch's character really falls into a state of mental ill health. And it felt like that happened quite quickly. And it just ended up feeling like it was ticking boxes rather than telling a really interesting story. Question number 6 is biggest surprise. And for me, this was Elvis. Baz Luhrmann is a director who's very hit and miss for me. I really love Strictly Ballroom, his first film, but when he got a bigger budget, I just found his style just was too much for me. I didn't fall in love with it the way a lot of people do. I find a lot of his storytelling is very self-indulgent, Moulin Rouge especially. So I was going into Elvis not necessarily expecting to love it, but very curious about what he'd done and about seeing the performances. And like the first probably half hour, maybe even an hour, was kind of confirming my expectations of a Baz Luhrmann film, but eventually it kind of settled down and let Austin Butler play Elvis, let him play out the scenes, and it just became so engaging because Austin Butler was incredible in this film. He just so embodies Elvis, and like I'm not even that familiar with Elvis or haven't seen any of the Elvis films or anything, but you just forgot you were watching an actor. Like you felt like you were watching a real person going through all this stuff, and I ended up just feeling so attached to this character by the end. I mean, the film obviously still has its issues in that Tom Hanks's performance was just bizarre. I didn't necessarily hate it because it was, I guess, a choice that Baz Luhrmann had made. He wanted Tom Hanks to act this way and do that accent, so that's what he was doing. But it did feel very off-kilter with the way Austin Butler was playing Elvis, which was to be really real and raw with the character. Also, Elvis has many problematic aspects, not least the fact that he met his wife Priscilla when he was in his 20s and she was 14. And they do not mention that in the film in any way, so You know, it's very much taking a particular view of Elvis's life. But for Austin Butler's performance alone, I was very surprised at how much that affected me. Question 7 is favorite new director, debut or new to you? The original question was favorite new author, so I've just gone with director because that feels like the easiest thing to compare it with. So for me, this is the Daniels, which is Daniel Scheinert and Daniel Kwan. They directed Everything Everywhere All at Once. And they also directed Swiss Army Man that came out a few years ago with Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano. And I hadn't seen that film, so I watched it in preparation for seeing Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it was as bizarre as you might think, considering it's a film about Paul Dano making friends with Daniel Radcliffe as a corpse. While I didn't necessarily love it as a film, it was definitely a unique watching experience, not like any other film I'd seen before. And Everything Everywhere All at Once I loved. There are a few things where I thought they could have shortened it. It was a bit long. It was a bit repetitive in places. But they so clearly are so creative and just making exactly what they want to make, which is literally so rare. To see people genuinely making something so creative that so clearly came directly from their brains is just so cool. So in that respect, I'm just excited to see whatever they make next. The next question is newest fictional crush. And even if I was to refer to this with books, I don't think I've ever had a crush on a fictional character. It would be a crush on the actor themselves, not on like the character. Though I guess in a way you are having a crush on the character because you don't know who the actual actor really is like. Anyway, for this, I'm going to pick Martin Short because I love him. I love Only Murders in the Building. I've been watching some of his back catalogue. He's been in some really strange films, but I just think he's so funny and just seems like a genuinely lovely person. As bizarre as some of the films I've watched that he's been in, I still had a great time because he's in them. So question number 9 is the newest favourite character. For this, I decided to go with Nicolas Cage as himself in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. If you haven't heard of this film, it is a film where Nicolas Cage plays himself in this role and in this character. He's very much playing on the public perception of him and his career. This fictional Nicolas Cage is at a point in his career where he wants to do serious work again, but he's been making money doing more trashy films for so long that no one wants to hire him for serious roles anymore. His agent then calls him up and says, I've got this rich guy who wants you to come stay with him in his villa because he's a huge fan. Nicolas Cage very reluctantly goes and does that. This ends up being Pedro Pascal, who is a big fan, wants Nicolas Cage to read his screenplay. They become really good friends, but then Nicolas Cage bumps into a couple of FBI agents who inform him that he is caught up in the middle of like a gang or a mafia group or something of that description. The details aren't really that important in this film. It is much more about the vibes. It was such a fun film. I hadn't seen that many Nicolas Cage films, and so I watched a few in preparation to see the film, and I loved them. I think he's hilarious. I actually didn't really like the more serious, like renowned films that he's been in, like Raising Arizona. I found that quite boring. Whereas Face Off, I had the best time. I thought he was so good at playing both of the roles that he plays in that as well. So for this film, if you're on board with, you know, Nicolas Cage's style of acting, then you're just gonna have a great time. Him and Pedro Pascal clearly have a great friendship. It comes across so well on screen. It gets a little bit self-congratulatory by the end, but you kind of forgive it for that because it's just fun. It's got fun action sequences. Just a film designed for you to have a good time. Question number 10 is movie that made you cry. Many films make me cry for many number of random reasons, but I picked Limbo for this one. This is such a beautiful film about a group of refugees on a very remote Scottish island. They are in limbo, waiting for the British government to either reject or accept their refugee application. What I loved about this film is a lot of films about refugees or about, you know, similar topics can obviously be very sad because it is a very sad and awful situation that, you know, this system even exists. But the director has done this film in a style that is really visually beautiful. The way he's shot everything is stunning. The style of the acting and the script is almost Wes Anderson in the way it's a little bit stilted with these very quirky characters who have these quirky interests and habits, and in a way that makes the film more effective because you kind of get so drawn in to these characters who are just living their lives as much as they can while in this limbo state. And so when stuff gets a little bit even more serious later on in the film, it just affects you so much. Would highly recommend seeking out that film when watching it if you can. Number 11 is a movie that made you happy. I've picked Fire Island for this one. I can't believe I haven't talked about this on this channel before, because Fire Island is a modernized version of Pride and Prejudice. It's written by and stars Joaquin Booster, who plays the Elizabeth Bennet stand-in. Bowen Yang plays his best friend, who is the Jane Bennet stand-in. Him and his group of gay friends go to Fire Island, which is an island, I guess, close-ish to New York. I think that's the geography. It's a place where they have a huge gay celebration every year, I guess. And then they bump into this group of super rich people, where you have one of them who's really nice, who's really interested in Bowen Yang, and he's the Mr. Bingley stand-in, and then you have the standoffish, awkward character played by Conrad Rickamora, who is the Mr. Darcy stand-in. And he is so good as Mr. Darcy. His interpretation of the character is so accurate that I would put him right up the top of my list of like favorite Mr. Darcy performances in films. Obviously, as a Pride and Prejudice fan, it was so fun to work out which characters were standing in for which ones in the book, and seeing the plot points play out in a modern way. But also, Joaquin Booster has just so perfectly captured the essence of the novel, in that it's about class and wealth disparity and our perceptions of each other and the prejudices that we have and the things that we assume about people because of how much money they have or the kind of job they have. And it was very, very funny as well, just so well written. I had such a fun time watching it, and if you're going to watch a Jane Austen film adaptation this year, make it Fire Island, that's for sure. Question number 12 in the original tag is, what's the most beautiful book you've received or bought this year? So obviously I'm just gonna go with what's the most beautiful film poster from a film of this year. That has to be Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just stunning. It actually has 2 posters and both of them are stunning. I remember seeing those posters and was like, well, I have to see that film. Like, it just makes you want to see it because there's so much going on. And question number 13 is, what movies do you need to watch by the end of the year? So I've gone with some on my watch list that aren't new releases, because I guess I've already answered that in a different question. I obviously have a very long watch list of films I want to see. I just picked a couple of classics that I haven't seen yet that I really do want to get to. So A Streetcar Named Desire, I haven't seen that yet, and that's a classic. And then On the Town as well, which is a musical with Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra, in which they play sailors and they do lots of singing and dancing, obviously, because it's a musical. And weirdly, I watched an earlier film that they were in called Anchors Aweigh, where they also play sailors in a musical. That film is quite famous because it has Gene Kelly dancing with the animated mouse, which is a very famous scene. But apparently On the Town is better in terms of its storyline, so I'm very curious to watch it and like compare the two. So that's the end of the questions. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite film has been so far this year, or tell me what you're looking forward to in the last half of the year. I will see you in my next video. Bye!